Okay, we are live this morning and it is January 27th, Thursday morning. And this is the Senate Transportation Committee. And our first item agenda is some discussion about the federal and state infrastructure funding for all our charging stations. And we have many power companies with us this morning. And Senator Ingalls, you had some questions. Why don't you lead off with some of the questions and concerns before we turn it to our guest?
I don't think any were in the.
Yes, yeah, right ahead.
They're all in the waiting room right now.
Oh, you haven't let them in yet? Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Not sure why. I can't come in. There's 6 people in the waiting room.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Hold on a second.
My Zoom client updated this morning and I had to reboot. I don't know if that's part of this.
Morning.
Good morning.
That's everybody. Other than Senator Kitchell, I think we have everybody we're expecting.
Okay, everybody's in. Okay, well, my apologies. We'll start over. This is the Senate Transportation Committee, and it is Thursday, January 27th, and we're leading off this morning with the issue on federal and state infrastructure funding. We have many power companies with us this morning to talk about this issue. It certainly is going to be a big issue in the future. We've been talking about it for a few weeks about all the electric vehicles that are coming in our future, and like General Motors and companies they're going to stop making gasoline engines and just do electric. So it is going to be an issue that we're going to have to talk about in the future here. So with that, I just turned to Senator Ingalls. You had a couple questions that you want to lead off with.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming today. And I really want to thank the roadmap that you set forth with the memo that you sent out. I mean, we're going to electrify the state. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And I think the public's got the appetite for it. So it's nice to have areas of concern that we can follow, we can budget, we can try to plan this thing out, we can work together and make it all work. But when you see a $2.2 billion number, it's large, but it makes sense to me. I guess the first question that I would have to ask, and I don't mean to make it sound this way, but what's the impact going to be to the ratepayers that we see when we see a big number like this?
Okay, who would like to lead off this morning? There are, like I said, there are many folks from different power companies and Green Mountain Power, Vermont Electric. Who would like to start off?
Well, why don't I just weigh in with one comment, and then the smarter people can weigh in, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And Senator Ingalls,
right.
to your question. I think the scope of it's a good question. I'm Carrick Johnson, for the record. I work for Vermont Electric Power Company, Velco. My response, direct response to your question, Senator, is that represents a once in a lifetime, probably for us, opportunity. If we challenged ourselves to be creative and to not think small, given this is the one time we might get federal dollars to buy down the cost of work we know we need to do, and the kinds of value we know our I should say our customers, the distribution utilities, their customers, their members, their owners want. So this was, if we had the chance to get federal dollars that could really advance Vermont in the vision we know we all want to accomplish, what does that look like? How much could we do? And I really credit the distribution utilities, Green Mountain Power, Vermont Electric Co-op, Vermont Public Power Supply Authority, Burlington Electric Department, because they came up with things like, I think I recall in a previous hearing, Senator, you talked about wiring of people's homes. That's on the list. We've talked about keeping things reliable and vegetation management, so we keep things reliable if we're going to have more people using the grid. That's on the list. But that's not normally stuff you'd see on one bill at one time for one short period of time. This is like 20 years or so of investments over time that would normally take place over then and could be absorbed. This is all focused aggregated in one big ask in the hope that the federal dollars could advance that vision. I'll stop there and maybe other folks have a response.
Any questions before we move on to someone else? Senator Ingalls?
Well, just a comment. And we can see that. I mean, we can see that it's a roadmap into which I appreciate. I really, really do. And when I look at my 44 towns that I represent and stuff, I mean, I do understand that we have a older population, older homes, and all of that, and we don't want to be left behind either. I mean, we want to be brought up into to the rest of the state and all of that, but it just gets down to it has to be an equitable situation for my 44 towns as well, and it's going to get back down to dollars and cents for us, so that we don't get left behind. I do recognize it is a wish list of sorts, but there's a lot of stuff on there that does need to happen to double the amount of electricity in 28 years to be able to distribute throughout the state.
Rebecca, is this something you are so good on this this question.
Well, I think what I think would be valuable is, as we go through the presentation, and talk about all the pieces we want to talk about. Absolutely. Sure. Your question, I think, is embedded in there in terms of what does this mean and what does that cost and what does that look like? So I would echo Carrick's point, is that some of this is about investments we were planning to make anyway, but we're trying to accelerate them. And so that, does have some cost pressure on rates, and federal funding can offset that cost pressure on rates. Some of what you see is wouldn't be borne by ratepayers. So the home, as Carrick mentioned, upgrading homes, that is not currently part of our tariffs as electric company, but we also recognize it's foundational to this transition and realize that not everyone has the ability to do that. So that's really getting to your point of energy equity. And some of these pieces are actually in response to some of what we're seeing around climate change. So vegetation management, for example, is in there. Emerald ash borer, that's not about electrification. That's the fact that it's going crazy and impacting our whole state, and climate change is partly responsible for that. So there's definitely some pieces in here. I hope as we go through, we can answer that question for you more specifically. And I also think that there is some truths here in that our mission to do what we can to mitigate climate change and to electrify has amazing benefits and also does have some costs. And so that's what this whole conversation is about, is how do we use federal dollars to limit that? How do we make sure that we're addressing energy equity as we go through this transition, and that we're meeting the needs of our consumers as they're moving there? Because at the end of the day, our job is to provide that foundational grid that is safe, reliable, and affordable, and easy and seamless for our consumers who are making choices around their home heating and transportation and all those things. So we need to be able to keep up with them and be able to support whatever choices they're making in their homes and businesses. So it's complex in pieces, and please be assured that we talk about affordability at every moment as we're going through this. And also know that the world's changing quickly around us, and that we need to be there and responding and adjusting to that.
Good, thank you very much. So why don't we go down the list of all the folks that are here, and then the committee can ask questions at that time.
And it sounds like you guys might have a presentation as well. Okay. Yeah,
we do.
Okay, who would like to start?
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question? Senator
Sure.
Ingalls sent a copy of an email that was sent to a number of committee chairs. I was one listed, which I never received. I could go look in junk mail, but I don't know who sent it to me. And it was outlining costs. And I think it was done in response perhaps to a request from Representative Briglin. I'm not sure, but I would just like to say I was that I didn't get it. And the only way that I did receive it was, I don't know, Senator Ingalls, someone provided him a copy, and that's how I got it. So I just wanted to let people know. So I don't know who submitted it. If I wanted to find it in junk, who sent it out?
I think that specific memo was sent by Melissa Bailey from VIPSA, but Senator Kitchell, I can make sure that we send it directly to you as well.
Well, I did get it via Senator Ingalls, but I just, so I know that it was brought up in committee, and I was like, I don't know anything about it. And I was quite surprised when I discovered I was a recipient of the communication. And I just want to be on record to say, I didn't receive it in directly. And so fortunately I have it, so you don't need to resend it, but it may have been just what ends up in perhaps my spam file, which is a mystery to me. So I just wanted to state that on record, because I was quite surprised when Senator Ingalls was referencing it. When I got the copy and discovered I was a recipient of it, I don't want anyone who might be listening to say, why don't you know about something that was sent to you? Because it just wasn't received.
Thank you. Okay, we want to go down the list, or how would the committee like to do this now? Everyone want to make their presentation? We have 6 different presenters today. So we want to go down the list. Is that their wishes? Okay,
Yes, please.
Let's do that. Okay, who would like to be next?
Let me just check if I may, Mr. Chairman, because I like where Rebecca left off with your questions. We have 2 things we were asked to respond to, Mr. Chairman. One was the capability, reliability of the current grid to do some electrification, and we're prepared to address that. That's Velco, Vermont Electric Power Company. But we also, as Rebecca noted, we have their presentation for each that gives the overall vision. Rebecca gave you a taste of that identifies each of the specific initiatives that together create that Vermont roadmap, as Senator Ingalls said. So we could, what's your pleasure, Mr. Chairman? We could do whatever you'd like.
Any committee have any way you want to do it?
I'm comfortable with whatever the power company wants to, whatever you guys want to present. We're here to listen.
All
Well,
right.
good. Then we're gonna go because we're ready. We're all revved up here. Okay, let me if I can share my screen, and I think we'll go here. Is that okay here now?
Yeah.
Are you seeing the 2 slides or just the 1? Can you see the slide that's coming? Okay, 2. Then let me do this.
We see 2.
Okay, okay, this is painful. Let me just do this.
And Carrick, is this the presentation under Hans's name?
Yes, it is. I'm just
That's
gonna
correct.
do this. Sorry. I'm just gonna do this, and then we'll do it. Sorry for the delay. Okay, still see 2, or is it 1?
No, it's
Fun, good. Okay, Mr. Chairman and committee, my name is again Carrick Johnson with Velco. With me is my colleague and probably the smartest transmission planner in New England, Hans Presume. What we thought we'd do, Mr. Chairman and committee, it's just lay out about 1 minute on Velco, because I'm not sure, Senator Mazza, if all the committee members are away. This is the first time I think we've been to your committee in some time that I can recall. Just maybe a minute on Velco itself, and then Hans will talk about the capability and reliability of the current grid, what we see happening over the next 10 and 20 years, and then a couple recommendations to continue to keep that grid reliable as it transforms, as Rebecca Town said. I hope that makes sense. With that, just a quick word about Velco. I mean, like many other Vermont institutions, Velco is a unique creature actually in the United States. You see our vision and role there. Velco was actually created in 1956, the first transmission only utility created in the United States. It was created to go connect to St. Lawrence Seaway Power. Former Senator Aiken was able to secure a deal. Actually, at the time, Senator Ingalls, he invoked the people of the kingdom to get a nice block of inexpensive power. Since we were a neighbor of New York and New York was going to take federal subsidies, we should have access to a cheap block of power. Velco's was created to build the wires necessary to connect to that renewable asset. That's how we got started. Bringing it right up to today, the things that make us different, one is our ownership. We're owned by all 17 distribution utilities, so Barton, Orleans, Burlington Electric Department, GMP, all the utilities own Velco, plus a public benefits corporation. That's who helps us set the table and the direction. Secondly is money. Unlike any other transmission company in the United States, the profit Velco makes on the federally guaranteed rate of return on transmission investments, the profits go back to our distribution utility customers and have to go to the benefit of customers by state regulatory requirement. So if we do our job right and keep the lights on and make a small profit on the side, that helps lower rates for every grid connected customer in the in Vermont. So it's a unique model. There's nothing else like it in the United States. You see our vision, and you see the roles that we play. Fundamentally, given the time, because we took a little bit of time, I'll just say this: there's really nothing we do without partnerships, without the collaboration of the distribution utilities, the Public Service Department, the concurrence of the Vermont Public Utility Commission. That's how we operate. And let me just stop right there. Any questions on our overall structure? We have about 152 employees, and our headquarters is in Rutland. That's it. Okay. Hans, if you would, please. Yes,
Carrick,
yes.
This is Jane Kitchell.
Yep.
I just had a question. When you were talking about transmission and you're talking about St. Lawrence Seaway, a lot of the transmission now comes from Hydro-Quebec. And there was an effort to bring another line down, and there was a proposal to follow the Velco corridor for that new transmission. Other states, New Hampshire, Maine, there was one proposal to put a line across Lake Champlain. It made sense to bring it down that Velco corridor through the Northeast Kingdom. Is that, I realize this isn't what you were here to talk about, but it was going to have also additional benefits to the area, to the state. Is that still under, I was just wondering, give us a status. Is that still yet to be determined, or is the deal closed and Vermont is definitely out?
Yet to be determined. Vermont's still one of the closest routes between supply to the north, demand in the south. There's been 2 strikes on 2 different transmission projects, one in New Hampshire that failed, one in Maine that's been wounded. We'll see what happens, the New England Clean Energy Connect line. But there is, like you could say almost, Senator Kitchell, like an 80% permitted line proposed for Vermont that has the support of the current administration and others, has our support. We negotiated a deal such if that project gets built, it's called the New England Clean Power Link underneath Lake Champlain within state road right of way. They negotiated a deal with the Vermont Department of Transportation. A lot of benefits to that line. It was viewed as a bit too expensive at the time, so it didn't win the competition with Massachusetts. It's back in play to some degree. What's going to happen? Unclear.
So it would go, it's the Lake Champlain route that is the top contender, not the Northeast Kingdom corridor.
I would describe it as a contender, not the top contender. As far as I'm aware, there is no Northeast Kingdom proposed line currently, Senator.
Okay. All right.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hans, if you would, please.
All right. Thank you, Carrick. And morning, everyone.
Morning.
We are 20 minutes into the session here, so I'm gonna go really quickly, but please stop me if you have any questions. What I'd like to do today is to review the 2021 transmission long-range plan, because it answers the questions about our ability to serve increasing electrification loads. And first, what I will do is just very briefly go over our in-state generation. I believe Mr. TJ Poor of the department covered Vermont sources of energy, but it's important to understand the amount of generation that we have in the state and the types of generators that feed load in Vermont. About 80% of our generation is renewable. As you can see here, I've noted the fossil units. But other than that, all the generators on this list are renewable: hydro, wind, landfill gas, etc. And the largest, fastest growing type of generation is solar PV. It's about 400 megawatts today, and as of 2020, it's probably 430 right now, so it's increasing quite a bit. And a total, it's about 1,000 megawatt in state. That is the amount of generation that could serve Vermont load. And anything that the in-state generation is not serving is flowing on our transmission system. Right? And this is why we need a strong grid, be able to import energy when our generators are either not available or the weather does not allow them to generate. Our peak load, winter and summer, are about 1,000 megawatt. And looking at this table, you would say, well, we have enough generation to serve Vermont load, except that these generators are weather dependent. So if the wind is not blowing, if it's not sunny, or the panels are covered with snow, we need our grid to import power into the state. Next slide, please, Kirk. And so every 3 years, we publish our 20-year plan. This is required by Vermont statute and PUC order. The primary objective of the plan is to address our ability to serve peak loads. We also use the plan as a means to inform the public and policy makers. Because the public and everyone in the state that's interested in energy matters need to know how the grid is transforming, and we need to understand the critical issues, the challenges that we're facing as we try to decarbonize the grid. And so we have looked at peak load serving issues related to transportation and heating, but we also look at our ability to integrate solar PV and other distributed generators. Next slide, please, Derek. So these are highlights from the plan. First thing is the system will be maintained in a way, or a plan and operate that's reliable. We're going to be able to serve increasing loads reliably. There are standards that we need to follow. The key is that because of the type of generators that we're installing on the system, we're going to remain dependent on transmission so that we can import energy into the state and actually export energy at certain parts of the day when there's a significant amount of solar PV running in the system. Our forecast is showing that the load would grow significantly, particularly in the winter. Electric vehicles and heat pumps are going to add quite a bit of load in Vermont. But even with that, we don't foresee any major upgrades on the transmission system within the 10-year horizon or beyond. But the key assumption is that we're going to be able to continue to use load management to be able to control loads, particularly electric vehicles. And we are recommending that we ramp up our ability to control loads. And that's the only way to avoid transmission upgrades and other grid reinforcements. We did not propose to address all concerns. There are parts of the system where we accept certain what we call performance criteria violations, and that's based on acceptable risk. But we continue to look at these areas and look for opportunities to address them over time. Because our peak loads are, whether it's summer or winter, occur after 6 p.m., 8 o'clock at night in the summer, incremental solar PV does not reduce load at the peak hour. So we need to recognize that. What it means is that we need to either use energy efficiency or storage or import power from our neighbors to be able to serve load at the peak hour. our Vermont utilities are very innovative, already using load control and other innovative programs, that we want to continue to do that. We also need to collaborate better, continue to be innovative so that we achieve our climate goals. Next slide, please. So for specifics, we study the bulk system, that is the system that Velco owns. We study what we call a predominantly bulk system. This is the interface between transmission and subtransmission. We're also required to study the subtransmission system that is owned by GMP and VEC and other utilities. And lastly, you'll see at the bottom that we have results for the high load scenario. Because it is difficult to forecast load growth, we looked at several scenarios around electric vehicle growth, heat pump load growth. We studied what we call low, medium, high scenario. And under all those scenarios, we find that we're able to serve Vermont load. But again, the key is to be able to control that load and shift the load away from the peak hours to middle of the night, say from 10 to 5 o'clock in the morning. So if we can continue to do that, we will not see significant upgrades on the transmission system. So what are we recommending? We've studied ability to integrate solar PV to be able to serve load. What we're saying, first recommendation is to pay attention to where we install solar PV, because there are parts of the system that are weaker than others. We're recommending that developers install solar PV where we have sufficient capacity. We need to focus on flexible load management. We need to have data architecture and be able to grab information and to be able to control loads, storage, flexible loads, so that we can accommodate future load growth. We think that the cost-effective solutions are going to be hybrid solutions that would include parts of storage, curtailments, load flexibility, and when appropriate, grid reinforcements, whether it's transmission, subtransmission, that may be required to maintain reliability. And lastly, if you can move to the next slide, Carrick, is what we are proposing. If we're planning to seek federal funding, and if we are successful, I'm highlighting on this slide parts of the grid where we think would be beneficial to reinforce. And you'll note that the upgrades are mostly in the northwest corner of the state. This is an area where we know we have constraints today. We've curtailed generation, wind plants up north. And if we have funds or are successful in getting funds to reinforce the system, we would target these particular areas of the system and increase the capacity there. Essentially from the Highgate substation near Swanton down to Williston in the South Burlington area, and also showing some GMP lines that are also affected. That would be beneficial to upgrade to enable significant in-state renewable energy growth in Vermont. So it's a short presentation. I want to leave ample time for the other utilities to present and also to answer your questions.
Questions at this time? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move. We'll switch around here. Let's move down to Green Mountain Power. We have Candace Morgan and Graham Turk. Would you?
Candace, I'm not sure, excuse me, Chair, is it better for VEC to go first just because
Okay.
they were going to build on what we were going to say. So thank you.
Go right ahead. Okay, Andrea.
Great. Well, thank you all for inviting us to join you here. And I have a presentation I will share very quickly here. My comments will really focus on the overview of the memo that you got, a little more detail behind that to be able to dive into some of our asks and some of the behind the scenes stories of where those are coming from. And then we'll also talk a little bit about electric vehicles, and in particular, what we at Vermont Electric Co-op see from our members in the northern part of the state. And Andrea is here with me. She will join in as necessary.
Okay.
And again, I'll try to move quickly. So just foundational, our energy world is changing quickly. You all know this. Climate change, increasing renewables, more distributed things on the grid. Storage is growing fast. The loads are growing because of vehicles and heating. And all of these circles that you see here in our world, those used to be areas that we managed that had some interplay that we would really work on separately, and they were connected. And now, I think as you heard with Hans talking about sort of some of these flexible hybrid solutions really overlap a lot of these areas. And so our world is getting much more interesting, much more complex. And you'll see that some of the dollars that we're asking for are really about helping to manage this complexity in a way that still adheres to our goals in terms of reaching our consumers with reliable electricity that makes it easy for them. Which gets to this point. So all of the distribution utilities and Velco got together to think about if we wanted to accelerate towards our future, then what would that look like? And that's what I'll describe in a minute. Our goals were really designed to be aligned with the Climate Commission and the Comprehensive Energy Plan. And as utilities, we are required, and our mission is to meet those goals at the least cost to consumer. So that is absolutely part of the equation. We're also committed to making sure that we reach all corners of the state. So all of the distribution utilities are part of this discussion, and we want to make sure that it's equitably distributed. And then, as you heard Hans say, not just Velco, but all of the utilities do a 3-year plan. So please know that we spend a lot of time thinking about what these investments will be, forecasting based on what we know today, and that we are committed to making thoughtful, targeted investments that truly have results on the ground and truly accelerate us towards these goals. I'm going to take a second just to talk about the triangle over on the left. So the bottom, the blue part, affordable, reliable, safe. Since we were incorporated in the 30s as an electric cooperative, not just us, all utilities, this is our mission, our core mission, to deliver affordable, reliable, safe electricity to our consumers. Now we're starting to see that there's a lot more focus on equitable, resilient. Certainly COVID, I think, has taught us all that people's patience for not having power is quickly diminishing. And people want it easy. Even with all of this complexity that is growing, people want to be able to just do what they want to do as easy as possible and have the energy to back it up. And then finally, the green at the top, it needs to be clean. So we're very aware that even as we electrify transportation, our goal is overall to contribute to reducing carbon in the environment, and that we are in a really important, one of the more critical areas of how to make that happen. And really thinking about how we use these investments to accelerate energy transformation. So these asks of federal dollars are really about making sure that we're balancing needed investments with impact on rates, that we also continue to be an energy innovator, which relies a lot on technology, that we're managing the impacts of climate change, which are significant in our world as a very weather dependent industry. And also that piece of equity of making sure as we make these energy transitions, we're bringing everybody along across the state. That's background. I will now dive into more of the details. So there's 4 core areas where we made our asks. The first is reliability and resilience. One is just relocating, upgrading distribution infrastructure. So just to give you an example of what this could look like, at VEC, we have a lot of, across our service territory, number 6 steel wire. And it works today, but has minimal increased capacity, and it's not as reliable and not as safe to work on. So we have to take outages when we work on it. We have been in a process, a pattern of replacing that over 20 to 25 years, which was about what we could do without impact to rates given our capital spending trajectory. With the acceleration towards electric vehicles and heat pumps, we now need to do that in 6 to 8 years. And so that's where I think there's still some important areas where ratepayers should and could and will pay part of that, and where these federal dollars can help us accelerate to get to that energy future faster. Another area is vegetation management. We talked about emerald ash borer. I'm sure you're all very aware and how much that impacts reliability. And then finally, some small pieces around apprenticeship and training. Just like everyone, we're impacted by the people resources to be able to do this work, and really encouraging people to go into the trades. The next category is grid modernization. And this is really about that complexity that I've been talking about, and the need for the technology behind the scenes to be able to make it all happen in a really flexible way. So this is where the easy part comes in for consumers. And this is also where we can use technology to leverage the grid that we have. So Hans really reviewed how the generation and the use don't always align, but there's lots of ways that we can use technology to use storage to help us align those more effectively. And that helps us take advantage of the infrastructure that we have today by investing in some of that technology.
Sure, Maza, may I ask a question?
Yes, go right ahead.
So I love this topic, and I'd love to learn more if you have more details. And one thing that on both the campaign trail, and I'm always talking about, as Senator Perchulik can probably relate, or at least recognize, is I want to see how our grid modernization can also tie with making our roads a lot more intelligent. Do you have any efforts where, as we're running the power lines, we're also thinking about ways to have our streets be able to have, adjustable speed limits, or otherwise smart signs that can have more real-time communications and so on? Is that something that's on your radar from a national perspective, that we're thinking more about how our transportation systems are working with our power line infrastructure in order to have intelligent signage as well as adaptive traffic monitoring?
Well, I think the real, our focus as a utility is really that foundational infrastructure. And so where I think that ties most is that we're really part of getting broadband and good coverage, to be ubiquitous. And there's certainly some ties to that, to broadband infrastructure and that communication infrastructure. And I think, that's really, again, that same infrastructure role, right? It's building that foundational infrastructure upon which all of these new technologies and other things can interplay. And I think that actually brings up a good point about this is this ask we have for utility infrastructure ties in a foundational way to so many of the other asks and things that are happening in terms of dollars. So I think that's cool. I think, that's really, I think, how it best connects. Okay, moving on. This is really just about the energy equity piece. We mentioned this already earlier, some support for the electrification of homes and businesses in terms of their service panels and upgrades. A 60 amp panel today isn't going to cut it when you get an electric car and heat pump and then another car, and making sure that between transformers and in-home electric systems, that there is the infrastructure to be able to support that, and that everyone in Vermont has access to do that, not just those with the funds to be able to invest in their home equipment. And finally, distributed generation integration. And this is about just the connection between the distribution system, the transmission system, and making sure that as a whole, we have the substation, transmission, and the communication capacity to be able to manage all of these things as a Vermont grid and connected to other grids outside of Vermont. So those are the overall asks. I want to transition now just a little bit to talking about electric vehicles, because I know this committee has spent so much time focused on that. Just know that from a load perspective, in terms of the question of can we handle the load, electric vehicle load is actually the best kind of load because it is the most flexible. of any type of load. Your car is parked, your school buses are parked way more than they're in use. And that gives us a lot of opportunity to think about how to use it to really charge when we have available power and available capacity in our system. And because it is flexible load, that electric vehicles help not only the consumer who's driving the electric vehicle, but by using the additional capacity, it can help keep costs minimal for all of VEC members and really all Vermonters. We have done some surveys of electric vehicle drivers at Vermont Electric Co-op. This is just, I just thought you'd like to see some pretty recent information from people who today, mostly in rural areas, are driving electric vehicles and what that looks like. So you'll see it's about 60% pure electric, 38% hybrid. Most people do home charging, a lot of home charging, you'll see that. This is particularly interesting. There's a lot of folks who have level 1 chargers. So level 1 is just plugging into your regular outlet that you have everywhere in your home. We have a high percentage of that in our service territory. We know that cost of those level 2 chargers is certainly a barrier. And we also know that for a lot of folks, particularly with plug-in hybrids, it works for them. So they have no need to upgrade to something more expensive or quicker. Charge location, you'll see is like almost all at home, no surprise. Some of that probably has a little bit to do with the prevalence of chargers, which there's a lot of efforts to expand on that. So that will make a difference. And also the convenience. Most people charge, there's a little error in the chart of charging frequency, 56% charge every day. In the 40s, charge a few times a week, and then those are the most common. And the last one is trouble locating a charge location. And most folks say no issue, but there's a good chunk there that they can't find a charger when they need it. And I think that's the thing. Home's convenient, it's always there, but when you need a public charger, you need it. Particularly on a day like today, my electric vehicle did not like the cold so much, and was pretty happy to be charged in at work this morning. All right, just quickly, our ongoing support for electric vehicles. We have purchase incentives, incentives for chargers, home chargers, incentives for publicly available charging. And then we also have some whole host time of use rates and some incentives for managing vehicle load during peak load. So those use rates are about that way of managing that flexible load that vehicles provide. And I know GMP will talk a little bit more about their experience with that. We are working on a pilot to manage level 1 charging. So as we mentioned, a lot of people just plug into their outlets. We're working on how to manage that through some smart plugs. We're working on developing more support for public charging stations and workplace charging. And then finally, Senator Chittenden talked about the future. For us, it's about vehicle grid technology. So eventually these vehicles are not just going to be a load, they are going to be a battery that is connected to the grid that can both charge and bring power onto the grid. That technology becoming over the next few years. There's some experiments out there, but that's pretty exciting and going to be a game changer in terms of managing this complexity and how vehicles fit into the overall premise of what it looks like to manage our power grid. And that's it. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move on. Green Mountain Power.
Good morning. For the record, Candace Morgan, Director of Corporate Affairs for Green Mountain Power. I really want to build on sort of the last points that Rebecca made in terms of talking about sort of the future that we see with electric vehicles and also the experience that we've had within our customers. And so I've got Graham Turk here, who's one of our innovation specialists who really helps understand and figure out the right type of customer programs in the EV space. I'm going to pretty quickly turn it over to him, and then we're happy to answer any questions on that or sort of the broader utility ask that brought us here today as well. So Graham, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you.
Sure. So a lot of points that you've already heard, but I think we just want to emphasize how excited we are about the opportunity for vehicle electrification. We know that it saves money for drivers on the total cost of ownership. That's from lower fuel and maintenance costs, and also helps drive down rates by electrifying. And we're focusing now on how to transition to EVs as quickly and equitably as possible. We know, as Rebecca mentioned, that customers charge mostly at home, and that EV load is extremely flexible. Charging can occur really anytime among many hours when the car is plugged in. And so you have a lot of flexibility in how you shift that load around to save money for everybody. For GMP, we provide a smart home charger for free with the purchase or lease of any electric vehicle. And we have 2 EV rates that provide about a 25% discount compared to the standard residential rate, with over 1,000 customers enrolled on one of those 2. They're easy for customers. They're meant to really be set and forget, so that the customer installs the charger, enrolls it on a device platform, and never really has to think about it again. And we've seen overwhelming participation in those rates, meaning that a lot of the load, overwhelming majority, is being shifted to times when costs and emissions are the cheapest. And we do this because the default option for these customers is to participate and to align their charging and align what is easy for them with what is good for them and good for the grid. So they're saving money, it's shifting load away from peak. It's really a win-win for all customers, but also the folks who are participating. And so if you imagine, I'm going to try this with my hands. I don't have good slides for it, but in the day, a daily load shape. So, you're starting in the morning, early hours, very low load. Everyone starts to wake up. You start to get a little bit of bump. Middle of the day, it kind of drops down. And then in the evening, comes back up, what we would refer to as peak load, before dropping down in the middle of the night. You have peaks and valleys, but there's a lot of room within that, both in the middle of the day and in the overnight hours, to fill in those gaps and to flatten our load. And electric vehicles, because of how flexible they are, because you can schedule them to charge at many different times, they're a perfect resource for filling those valleys and flattening our load curve, and making better use of the existing capacity of the grid we already have. And I would just add that we have the flexibility to do something different besides what we're doing now. There's ability to change hours of when our rates occur, stagger the times that EV charging starts, but we really want to focus on it being simple, set and forget, and delivering a good customer experience so that every electric vehicle owner has the confidence to get a full charge when they need it. And they're also saving money in the process because we're able to pass on some of the discounts. And we're confident that these programs will allow us to continue to manage EV load as adoption ramps up. As Rebecca mentioned, charging occurs at home. We don't foresee that changing. It's just convenient. People like getting home, plugging in. It'd be like having a gas pump in your backyard. It's easy, you don't have to think about it. And so we do expect that'll continue to dominate overall charging as more people continue to choose electric vehicles.
Should people plug in at night when they get home, like 5 o'clock? You don't plug in then, you wait till 9 o'clock, or how does that work now?
Sure. So you plug in whenever you get home, and then on our rate, charging is paused until the start of that off-peak window. So you don't have to worry about getting up out of bed in the middle of the night. That's all done via the software and the rate, and the customer just sets it up in a mobile app or on the car itself, and they don't have to worry about actually plugging in the car when it starts charging.
I see. So yes, Senator Pertzik.
Yeah, and that's what I do. I just plug it in, and then it doesn't charge until the GFP allows it to start charging, and then it's fully charged by the morning. But my question for our guest today is we talked a lot about electrification. You guys all touched on that, but there's concern that I hear from folks that when they hear from the comprehensive energy plan that there will be a doubling of the need of electricity. And I think that worries people. It's something that people have asked in this committee. And since we have all the folks that are concerned about rates and the grid reliability, do you see a concern about a doubling of the need for electricity for electric vehicles, or just in general? I don't know how much of that doubling is electric vehicles, how much for heating and others. So that's a basic question. I think it would be good to hear quickly from you on if you see a problem with that or just more opportunities. But I also just want to point out that, electric load is driven by the consumer, so they might do it anyway, even if we weren't providing incentives. That's one. I mean, when I first got involved in Vermont energy policy, the big concern was electric load just from resistance heating, because all the ski areas were booming and putting in electric heat. And we were going to have to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on grid upgrades to provide grid reliability so that the condominiums at the ski areas could get power. We weren't trying to promote that, but we ended up saving a lot of money by getting rid of that or doing energy efficiency work to make sure that we didn't have to do a bunch of expensive transmission upgrades. So that's just a side comment about whether we're promoting it or not. The people might switch over, and so we need to be prepared for that. But my main question is, do you see a problem with that doubling of electric load to meet some of the goals that we have?
Let me try that if that's okay. We have in our forecast, we studied a high load scenario, and that's exactly to get at that question, right? If you have a high adoption rate for EVs and heat pumps, what does that mean to the system, to the grid? What we found is that the demand, there are two. When we talk about electricity, I want to focus on demand, because that's what the system, that's where you get the challenge, right? If it's energy, you can spread the energy around. Like Graham Turk was saying, is we can move energy from peak areas to valleys. If you can do that, you're great. What I'm worried about is the peak time from, say, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., where everybody comes home and plugs in their electric vehicles. If everyone is doing that, then for sure there'll be an issue on the system, right? The system today is a 1,000 megawatt system. We're able to serve that. We're able to serve 1,200 megawatts without any issue. But if you're at 2,000 megawatt, right, the system is not built for that. Okay, but what we can do then is to manage the load, move it from the peak areas to the valleys. That's what allows us to use the grid that we have today without significant upgrades. There are other things you can do. You can install storage, short-term or long-term storage, so you're able to manage the load, manage the capacity. And I'm hopeful that we can use a system where we can dynamically decide what resources to use at what time, so that you avoid these very high peaks and sort of smooth out the load, so that you don't need transmission grids, transmission grid reinforcements. Does that answer the question?
I think that was well said, Hans. It's really, this ask and a lot of what we talked about today is about how do you increase load with as minimal infrastructure expense as possible. And technology, flexible load, and then some infrastructure investments, I think, are what we're saying is the answer to that, right? How do we handle that that increasing growing load? And I think it also can solve some problems too. Right now in the Shiai, in the Northeast Vermont, we have more generation at times than we can use. And so some of that is about, I think, potentially building transmission to get it out, but also some of this load, we already have the power to serve that. And so that's an exciting opportunity to really grow load in the Northeast Kingdom and some of the northern parts of the state. So I think your question is great. And that's exactly what we're focused on figuring out how to do over that period of time.
Sorry, Maza.
Yes, go right ahead.
And to further on what Senator Perchlik has said, and I look at look at my constituents, I look at Jane's constituents, and a lot of where, Senator Perkle's constituents are on some of the rural areas. And I can see the scenarios, not so much as getting the power here. I mean, I have every faith that you guys can pump as much power in here. It's getting it distributed to the people that are going to be the end users, and the cost that it's going to be to do that. That's what I'm focused on. I mean, we all have areas. I mean, even Senator Mazza and Senator Chittenden, we all have areas we have that one section, or with myself being so rural in the districts that we have a lot of areas where if you have that stretch of line where all of a sudden 10 people decide to put in an electric car charger and put in heat pumps and all of that, those lines have to be upgraded. They just have to be, and the houses as well, because that's just the way that it is. That's the fact, and that's the cost of electrification. Rates are probably going to go up, and that's a reality of it as well. So it's not about getting the power here. It's about getting it out to the consumer base so that they can use it at the least amount of rate increase that could possibly happen. Because I think that we've heard here on a very honest discussion, which I think is very, very important to have to get to where we want to be, is that probably costs are going to have to go up. But how can we do that equitably affects people? Equity affects people all across our state. That's really where my concern is. I know it's coming. I want it to come. I'm probably one of the most forward-thinking people, where I've planned my life around it, with my business using solar and my house using heat pumps. I've just put another construction project in, and I wanted to make sure that when I ran the power line, that it would be able to be in the to charge cars or maybe even use a heat pump. So I just want to know at the end of the day how we're going to make the regular Vermonter, which we all have them, be able to afford the expansion of what's going to go. And that's not a question to be answered, but I do have a question. With the $2.2 billion, and I know, and I'm not going to pound on that, because I know that's a very honest thing. If we could make it all work, if we could wave our wand, yes, it's going to cost us $2.2 billion, but it's going to cost us some money. Would anybody here have a problem if we had the PUC look at these costs and get a second opinion? I mean, they are the people that are here to protect us from two costs that are wild. If we had the PUC go down that list and look and all of that, would anybody be bothered by that?
So I just wanted to mention that we have been asked by the House Energy and Technology Committee to take a look at this ask and hone it down into more specific priorities that are more, that it's hard to take action with that big thing. So I think it was helpful to understand the breadth and depth of the problem. And now we're working on putting it more in the frame of maybe if we had 100 million, where would our priorities be and what would those look like? Certainly as a regulated industry, we are constantly looked at by the PUC and the DPS, and those are always welcome conversations. I would also say that you're hearing all the time that time is of the essence. So that part of this is not just doing the work, but it's the speed in which we clearly need to do the work. And also this once in a lifetime opportunity to have federal dollars offset the costs for those members that, we serve most of your territory, Senator Ingalls, and, we see it too. We see it, we hear it, we live it. Our employees are living in those communities, and the more we can help offset those costs and speed up at the same time, I think that's the tricky part, right? And that we're trying to thread the needle and put all of our best hearts and minds on making that happen.
Questions? A lot of information to digest this morning. There certainly is going to be a lot of discussion in the future. One of my concerns has always been, how do we replace the gas tax when the automobiles go to electricity? And that's going to be a another subject that's going to have to be addressed sometime. Who collects the fees and how they're collected and how they get back to the gas tax subsidy or replacement. So, but that's another issue. Anything else that we have this morning? Any committee members, any further questions at this time? Senator Kitchell? No? Senator Perchlik, anything?
Senator Kitchell, you're muted, Senator Kitchell.
I know, I'm like, I had a
Okay.
question, but
Okay.
it escaped me. So I'm sure we're going to be having a lot more discussion on this topic. So if I think of it, but right now I don't have any questions.
Okay. Yes, Senator Chittenden.
I guess since we have all these this brain trust here, I might ask a question that I think came up in a conversation earlier, which had to do with rolling blackouts. And I would say that as we look to electrify so much more to address our climate crisis, I understand some of our emergency planning might have in the commentary or the discussion that one emergency mechanism might be to plan for a rolling blackout in order to handle the need. But I understand that's been the case for many decades. Does anybody have any commentary on speaking to any concerns that might exist out there regarding how we're going to plan to support the load in emergency planning and otherwise on that topic?
Well, I tell you what, I'll just do a quick answer and then invite others of the more potent members of the brain trust to weigh in. Senator Chittenden, I would say this: you're absolutely right. This type of concern has been in play for a number of years, given a confluence of factors. The ISO New England leadership thought to bring this, raise the concern a bit. I think since then, though, I just want to be clear, and I think you appropriately caveated the concern. There is a set of extreme circumstances that all have to line up for this to be an issue in the first place. Let's make that clear. If in the incredibly unlikely, but it does happen, that is an impactful event, thankfully, there's been a whole lot of work that has been done. I think it is fair to say that given ISO New England, their public issuance of that concern led to some additional conversations. Commissioner June Tierney convened a great discussion that precipitated further. So I would say right now, there are planning drills that are run. There is an incredible collaboration. I think you'd say it's led by Velco, but all the distribution utilities participate in various ways. In fact, in a breadth and a depth of exchange of information I have never seen before. So that I really think everyone has stepped up to the best of their ability, including Senator Ingalls, some of the smallest utilities, to make sure through the auspices of the Vermont Public Power Supply Authority, they're engaged. So we'll have ample, if that starts to happen, we'll have long lead time. The utilities know exactly how to interact with each other. There's drills every week that describe exactly how that would go. And lastly, I would say there's communication that would be practiced such so your constituents, you yourselves, all the various stakeholders would have ample notice. Here's what we're going, and it wouldn't be something where we just throw a switch. There'd be gradations. This is starting to emerge as a concern. We would walk that through if, in fact, that were to happen. Lastly, I can't help, Hans, check me on this. I can't help though, but use this opportunity to talk about in those kind of circumstances that just reinforces the value of having like McNeil and in-state generation, those kinds of resources that we have that are dispatchable that we can call on right here within Vermont's borders, just underlines the import of those, and as well as the strong connections to Hydro-Quebec. Those are incredibly valued precisely in these kind of conversations. That's my response to that, Senator.
Okay, big follow-up. That's it. Further questions? Well, we certainly have got a lot of information, and I'm sure we'll continue some of this discussion. It's an issue that's going to be around for some time because it's certainly going to move ahead slowly, but it's going to get there, and we're going to have to be addressing it. So thank you for all your time this morning.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I do have one question of the utilities. Last year, we passed legislation that would allow the broadband, the CUDs, to take advantage of the low interest financing that utilities are able to receive. And I know that Washington Electric had in their newsletter alerting members of a possible loan agreement with the Central Vermont CUD, which then they decided not to pursue, which I found out subsequently. I was just wondering, have there been any discussions with other utilities with the CUDs about that financing option?
I'm happy to take this one. We have
Yeah.
3 CUDs in our service territory, and NEK CUD is broadband is one of them who's pretty advanced in a lot of their planning. We have not been working on a loan with them. They've really been able to access it themselves, and that's been a lot of the value. Our focus has been on supporting them through the make ready work primarily. So really partnering with them on engineering, on paths, on where we can find some shared value. And then both Vermont Electric Co-op and GMP have a tariff that offsets the cost to reach unserved people. So people who don't even have 4 megabits, that I know is also contributing to reduce the capital cost of that make ready work. So that's been the way we've been supported, but not directly through those loan mechanisms. Although I know it's been extraordinarily valuable to them to have access to the financing, the grants, the support that the legislature granted this past year. We've been seeing it's been accelerating that work, and we are hopping to keep up with it. And that's an exciting challenge and opportunity for all of us.
Is everybody working well together with that? I think we'd heard earlier that there was a little bit of wars going on about getting space on some of these poles and territorial issues going on. I mean, as from what you folks see, do you see that that's going well? Because when you look at where it's been, when you look at trying to get this broadband, I don't want to get out of the subject, but when you look at where we've been trying to get broadband to the last mile, we've been doing it for a long time. That mile keeps on getting longer and longer and longer, and we spend millions of dollars to do that. And I'm hoping that there's good cooperation between everybody to get that pushed out and to get that job finished. Again, an equitable situation, especially up in my area, that the pandemic really forced us when we did in-house schooling and homeschooling, that we found a lot of shortfalls. So hopefully the cooperation is going well between everybody.
Yeah, we're very focused on that. You know, there's 17 utilities plus consolidated. So I know sometimes that can feel frustrating for those broadband folks to figure it out. But I do know we're doing everything that we can to support them. We get good feedback about that. And more importantly, certainly in our service territory and across the state, we see the number of unserved and underserved dropping every month. And, you know, that's really the end result that we're all aiming for. And we still have a long way to go, but I'm very optimistic about the plans and the acceleration of this work.
I would just weigh in, Senator Ingalls, and support Rebecca and the optimism. Our Vice President for Technology, Dan Nelson, serves on the Vermont Community Broadband Board. So we get a good insight there. I tell you, they're moving at incredible speed. I think there was a little bit, but it was a new entity. And so it was for some of the smaller utilities too. You have, that when they're behind on reliability work and they have to do this, and someone wants to establish this as a priority, there is, I think, inevitable a little bit of getting used to each other. But at least from our perch, that has worked well. We're in the midst of pursuing and permitting a 600 to 800 mile expansion of our statewide fiber network. And that has just opened up additional opportunities for collaboration, co-location, sharing of material, teams. So to tell you the truth, it's like a relationship when they first arrive. Everything for the eye have seen, it's incredibly constructive. The volunteers and the CUDs are amazing, the amount of hours and what they're putting in to get this done. But again, I share Rebecca's optimism. I think we're on the path. I think we're going to get this done.
There's an old saying, hot love soon cools. So let's hope the hot love continues.
Well, I want to thank everybody. You certainly, each and every one of you, know your job very, very well, and have gathered a lot of information. And I know it's a challenge every day, but thank you for sharing all that information this morning. It's very helpful as we go forward in this on this future of electric vehicles, and it's coming at rapid speed, I think. Yes, anything else? Go ahead, Senator Kitchell.
No, I'm just saying the broadband rollout is so important to that technology is so important to the whole work ahead in terms of maximizing the demand on load and making sure that we're using power at the best time, as well as I think, they can be in the reverse for battery stored power when it's needed. So there's a real strong connection between the two initiatives. And so it's really encouraging, like the federal money that you're talking about coming from grid improvements. The broadband money is also, we would never have been able to do it as a state at the pace. And I think the creation of the board and having Christine head up the board has also helped move things along. So, and having the experience with utility in the world of utilities. So it just seems like we're reaching a really good tipping point, but it takes everybody working together. And so I appreciate the update.
Any other comments from any members, or at this point? We certainly covered a lot of area this morning. I thank you again for all coming and giving us some good information, and you'll probably be hearing from us in the future. Okay, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, is Wanda with us this morning?
Yes, Senator, she's with us.
Okay, okay, let's move on to Department of Motor Vehicles. Overview of accomplishments.
Good morning.
That shouldn't take long.
Oh,
just a joke.
No, it shouldn't take long. Oh, that's weird, isn't it? Look, we gotta just adjust this camera, the silver button.
Yeah, we certainly want to see it.
Yes, I have Mike with me as well.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna try. It's not working. What'd you do? Oh, there we go. That's like magic. So, good morning.
Morning.
We were just going to provide a really quick overview of the 2022 accomplishments to the committee, and then we're scheduled to come in tomorrow and do an overview of the budget.
Okay.
So first of all, I just also want to thank the committee for your efficiency and the miscellaneous bill being voted on yesterday.
Yeah, we took a vote after you left, and we defeated it, but that's all right. We won't,
Okay. So I do have a PowerPoint, and Jeannie, I think if you can share, Jordan Villa is going to take control. Is that correct, Jordan and Jeannie?
I wasn't told who would do the sharing, but I've just made Jordan co-host so he can do that.
It's just like magic. So Jordan, if we can just go to the full view of the PowerPoint, I think we'll be fairly quick with this. This is the Department of the overview. Next page, please. We always summarize what our key, what we're responsible for. And I know this committee is very familiar with this, so I'm not going to read it to you. But, it is the operations of and registering all types of motor vehicles. We also manage several safety programs, including driver education, the vehicle inspection, our dealership program, school bus safety and motorcycle training. And we have the operations unit, enforcement and safety, finance, logistics, and we have a small team called special programs. Next slide. So what we're just giving you are some quick highlights and updates, regarding COVID-19, updates. We've spent a lot of time. We have one individual that really focuses on our homepage and communicating with the public through the homepage, Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. We track this weekly, and it's successful. We get a lot of information out of it. We've opened 10 sites, 6 full-time branch offices and 4 satellite offices. We implemented the online scheduler, and the system is working, and it does minimize wait time. We still allow for walk-ins, and they are our customers. We do not turn them away. If they're a walk-in customer and they're going to experience a long wait, we try to schedule an appointment or take their documents and process them in the back room and mail them. And it's really the customer's choice. Some choose to wait, some hand over their documents. It's a mix. I think you remember a few years ago during COVID that you asked us to figure out a creative way to do temporary registrations online. That program is still up and running, and we issued 68,000. We are in the process of right now working with Nick on putting some more security enhancements and information into those temporary registrations and some restrictions. And I'm going to have Mike just quickly highlight, we were having issues in other states.
Correct. So for the record, Michael Smith, Deputy Commissioner of DMV. So basically what we've done is we've added in a requirement online to indicate your driver's license number.
Yeah.
If you do not have a driver's license number, you're not denied the temporary plate. You would have to actually come to the office to apply for it. We've also added some watermarks into the actual plate to add some more security features, and we've worked to lock the system down, if you will, to not allow you to print more than 2 plates.
Yeah.
So, and 2 of the same plate. Before you could just rattle off as many photocopies or print as many copies as you wanted. Now the system kind of ties that back.
And as the program became more popular, we were seeing, large number of plates being issued that were not necessarily connecting. And so we were concerned. And I think we had one out-of-state company, was it 600? Or one out-of-state person issue 600 temporary plates. And, we try to maintain our credibility, especially with our neighboring states with the program. We saw a decrease in mail transactions, interestingly, in 2021, but I think that's the balance with the online services that we have. And we had over 85,000 licenses and permits renewed or replaced online. Any questions?
Nope.
Next slide. This just highlights, we've talked about the special programs division, and this is really where we're doing our legislative activities. You hear the name Matt and Jordan, and we also have another gentleman, Michael Charter. He does all of our public outreach, social media, and they're also taking a big lead in the core modernization project. Next slide. But one of the things the team does is they're a part of the leadership team, and they also help us look at strategies and evaluate either requests that came in or things that we want to improve. In this committee, we're going to go back quite a few years, I think maybe 3 years, the accessibility and translation of DMV materials. We continue to work with the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants to identify relevant documents for translation. We are still maintaining the 10 languages for the license application. We haven't seen a shift in if it needs to be modified to additional languages or delete languages. We've taken a great amount of effort And it is the Google interpreter, but on our homepage, we've brought it forward that if you need direction or guidance on how to complete a DMV transaction, you can go right to the translator and at least read the document and guide you through that. And that's become very popular. And one of the other items that we started exploring in the fall is the Department of Disabilities and Aging and Independent Living met with us to explore ways to improve accessibility to DMV offices for the deaf and hard of hearing. And while we do have some tools, it is really about sign language and using some of our messaging boards and other communications and expanding that to sign language. And that one is still under development. Next slide. This is a document that is familiar. I think you may have seen it in the secretary's overview, but these are the details on, what we accomplished regarding credentials, number of registrations, online license transactions, and walk-in traffic. Next slide. Because I really just like to highlight, quickly, here's some of our data. We're always looking at performance. So we did serve more than 230 customers with the scheduling system with a wait time of 11 minutes. We administered 19,000 plus in-person knowledge and skill exams, and that is for driver's license, commercial driver's license, and school bus and motorcycle endorsement. And we had 17,000 knowledge exams were also completed online. And that's specific to learner permit and motorcycle. Questions? Next. The information processing unit. This is where DMV manages all mail, quality control, data entry, retrievals units, and everything that comes in by the mail or online. This is one of the areas that we are going to see significant change in operation when we have our full new core system in place. But they processed 199,000 applications. We were experiencing, and you probably heard about this from some of your constituents, an unprecedented number of online and mail-in transactions. We were 34 days, sometimes even higher, but that's pretty much the average backlog from January to October of 21. We took the opportunity every day to realign staff where we could realign, use staff in our branch offices. We did, mail deliveries to those to get that standard back to 8 to 10 days. And we've been able to maintain that. But it was an uncomfortable feeling for a while. I don't know if you want to add to that uncomfortable feeling, Mike.
I think you said it perfectly.
Next slide. The driver improvement information. This is the team that, fields all of our customer calls, but they also process all of the crash reports and the license suspension. This is our team that's really connected to judiciary for the most part. And this is just to give you an idea, 121,000 general phone calls, 24,000 emails, and each one of these take time. When one of our employees get a phone call, they're either looking for their documents or they're trying to figure out how to perform the service online or what form to use. These employees walk them through the procedure. They don't just say you can go online and do it. They guide them through that. So a phone call can take 15 or 20 minutes. We did hire, so when we started to use the scheduler in the beginning, we actually worked with the same vendor that the Department of Labor had in place, and used them because we couldn't manage with our staff the number of calls that were coming in. And so we worked with that company in DOL, and they answered only the calls to schedule appointments. So we have one phone line that is designated to call it, and there's an agent, and they will help you get your appointment at your closest location in the convenience of your schedule, because they may not have access to the internet. And there were 22,000 of those since May of 21. Driver improvement issued 21,000 suspensions and processed 41,000 reinstatements. And this is from direction, this is the correlation with the courts. And these transactions have to happen, both of them, within 10 days. And so, you know, and the way it works is you don't get one a day. Our staff usually get a list, and they have to go through those line by line from the courts and go in and manually enter and ensure that this information is updated. Some of you heard we had a really long wait again on phones. Last year, you know, we had employees that were ill, just like everyone else. We had, you know, they were out, and it was taking 30 to 40 and some days an hour to get someone to answer the phone. We've done some major shifting in how staff are going to answer the phone, when they're going to answer the phone, and how long. And Nancy Prescott did a great job. Our average time is 12 minutes. Questions? Next slide.
Real quick, Wanda, that's 12 minutes to get somebody to talk to you, or 12 minutes for the whole call? That's 12
Your
minute
wait time. The wait time could be, the average is 12 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
And there is some messaging, and I don't know it exactly, but there is a message that says there is a short wait. I think there's also there is a direction to, you can also leave your name and number, and we have a team that will call them back if you don't want to wait. But you know, it's like any tree phone. We have quite a few lines. I'm not sure how many, but because I'm drawing a blank, we have 23. If those are all filled, then it keeps you in line until the next one comes open. So that's really the 12-minute.
Wanda, are you experiencing a lot of issues of labor like everybody else is in the state? I mean, yeah.
Yes, we have vacancies where we work really hard to fill them. We are experiencing the same thing, you know, DMV, and I'm not exaggerating, and Mike knows this better than I do. You know, we would put a position out there and you'd get 25, 30 applicants. And I think, you know, some of us know a lot of people want to start their career with DMV because it's a great way to get into state government, to advance to other departments. I always say we're the Department of Investment for that, you know, new state employee. We experienced in the summer 0 applicants, and then, you know, 2 or 3 applicants. We just put one out, and I think we got 7 applicants. That's a low number for us. It's a low number. So we have gone back out on positions to try to attract and get more people. And Senator, they're just not applying. Or I don't know if there's so many state jobs open that they have options.
What's your opening now? Well, how many staff are you down presently?
I want to say 18. I'm not sure.
I was gonna say 12.
You were going to say 12?
Yes.
Okay. So we're, let's say 15 is the average, because Mike's got 12 and I've got 18.
And you have, from sickness, you probably have another dozen or so at all times, or that varies.
You know, I have to tell you, I can't, this department from the beginning of COVID and how we shut down and did a gradual rollout to the public, we had staff that were out or family members of theirs that were impacted. I will tell you the last 8 weeks we have the majority. For the first time, we would get spots here and there of people with COVID, but right now in operations, I don't know what that is.
I will say 15.
That's 15. But what we're experiencing is as they go out, individuals who have been ill are coming back in. So right now it's almost like a 15 FTE rolling cycle. New cases, and then the employees are able to come back in. And it's 5 days if they're vaccinated and they have to wear a mask. And most of it has been in this area, this slide that you're looking in our driver improvement information, our call center, and our counters, our public facing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Next slide. So the enforcement unit, the commercial vehicle operations, I know you are all familiar with this program, and we've talked about the IFTA and the IRP, and we collect gas and diesel, and this is not enforcement. I'm jumping ahead. This is part of operations. This is our very small unit that processes all of the permit applications. They collect all of the IFTA and the IRP receipts, and they are the team. And when I say they, there's 2 individuals really that are on the overall team that has developed and is testing the e-permitting system for industry to use. We have created a portal for the businesses to register their inventory. We have not rolled out for them to go online yet and get that permit. And that's anticipated in the spring of this year. And it's also a system, and we've talked about it a little bit, that will have the capability at some point for towns to join and work from this platform. And we've had meetings in the past couple of years with them, but what was decided is we would advance the state side of e-permitting and then go back to the communities and start bringing them in. Next slide. Just a few more initiatives that are coming out of operations. We do our automated testing system replacement project, and this is because a contract expired, but I think most of you know there's a tablet that you see the examiners carrying, and we use them in all areas that we test. We are actually in the process of automating that and connecting it more to the system. That's almost done. It's been, but it's probably been, I would say, 14 to 16 months worth of work. It's been a big lift. We are finalizing the vehicle registration tax estimator tool that's going to be available online. And if you want to highlight that, Mike, because you've taken the lead.
So basically what this system's going to do, and one of the big things that happens is people will mail in transactions to us. In Vermont, we tax based on purchase price or blue book value, whichever is greater. As a general rule, the blue book value is generally greater, which ends up in us mailing the document back to the customer. So it takes time, impacts them, impacts us. So this system will allow you to put in your vehicle information on our website, and it will calculate the value that we're going to calculate when you get here. So that way you have up-to-date information, you mail in your transaction with the appropriate fees, and it goes through faster, creating a more streamlined process for the customers and ourselves.
And again, this is one of the areas when they do it on their own, then we're sending back transactions, right, which, we don't like to do. That takes more effort. Next slide, please. So the DMV Enforcement and Safety Division, I know that all of you are familiar. We have our Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Unit, our Investigative Unit, and our Administrative Unit. You can see the data below. The commercial vehicle did 8,684 inspections. The commercial safety inspectors was 6,000. So I apologize. There were violations of 8,000 from the 6,000 inspections. We manage 547 dealer licenses, and we currently have 1,114 state inspection stations. Next slide. We were pretty excited this year. We implemented the first in the nation all electric. It's a Harley Davidson police motorcycle, and we used it. One of the things, and that's a picture of it. Many of us have had the opportunity to drive it. It's got some power. Yes, sir.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And the we haven't let Mike yet.
No, I wasn't allowed.
So, just really quickly, getting the electric motorcycle and being the first to get it, there was a build out that needed to go beyond what Harley Davidson had provided in order to have all of the lights and the policing components that need to be on a motorcycle. And one of the things that I will say is working with a partner that we purchased the motorcycle from, the individual at that shop ended up developing how you can harness everything that you need for lights and sirens while using the batteries, and really created or reconfigured how these motorcycles are wired. So a really big shout out to them. And the motorcycle has been viewed by many other states and Chicago, and this is a constant outreach to Vermont. How's it working? Unfortunately, we're spring to late fall, but it was out on the road, and it is efficient, and it still can be used even in the scenario of a commercial vehicle stop. And then we launched Seaview, which is a program you funded quite a few years ago. We finally got that off the ground, and essentially what that does is it makes all of the data on commercial vehicles on roadside from the federal level and state level accessible at hand. When they stop and, they would have to get papers, and they would have to go everything, and they'd have to figure out if that vehicle is truly registered or if there are any violations for safety reasons. And now it's right there at their tablet. So they're pretty excited about that. Next slide. We've talked about this, and I won't spend too much time because I understand you'd like us to come in next week and give you a little bit more detail on sticker on demand. We are still in beta testing. I do know I mentioned that we had 5 stations as of yesterday. We have 8, and then we have up to 10 stations that just do stickers for motorcycles and trailers. And we'll be here next week. We'll give you more detail.
I don't know why you're putting the sticker down the left-hand corner of the windshield. When you go to scrape them off, all that garbage is going to stay down the windshield. How are you going to get it out of there? Anyway.
Well, it's on the inside.
That's next week.
It's on the inside.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I will have a great response for you
You
by
better have
next
a great
week.
response. Have something that
Next
peels
slide.
off and not have to scrape it down there. How are you going to get all that scrappy paper out of there after?
Oh, how is the mechanic when they change it the following year?
That was a, I don't know who thought of that idea, but anyway, out there. Okay,
Yeah.
go ahead. Get you next week.
Next slide. This is just some quick highlights. I think sometimes people don't realize, the book of business. I know you do as a committee, but we have a full education unit, and we administer the state's driving training program for private driving instructors for new drivers. And we do align and partner with the Agency of Education. And then we do school bus clinics, and we have the motorcycle safety program, the commercial driving training schools. So we had over 3,000 students trained through this. We did launch a new online driving training tutorial to help the private businesses and the individuals to go in and have it online instead of just having the book. We have implemented a hybrid, and I think you'll remember this. So there's specific rules that say students have to have so much time in the vehicle driving and so much time in the classroom. And working with the Agency of Education, there's a hybrid approach of classroom. So you can do it online. And that's really the hybrid, because the way the rules on the guidelines were written is you physically had to be present. And so that's made a big difference for our private driving instructors. And we had 54 school bus clinics, 535 drivers were trained, 262 new drivers in school bus, and 273 renewing their certification.
Can I ask a question, Chair Mauser?
Yes, go ahead. Yep.
So, Commissioner Manoli, Wanda, one question that touches upon this slide and previous slides as well. I have noticed in my municipal roles in City Council that, and just yesterday when we heard about the $40 fee for towing, that many times the fees that we charge in DMV for these trainings I'm betting, as well as the registration fees, are often statically set, and then we don't have ways to graduate them incrementally, either through automated within the statute, making them gradually incrementally increase over the years, and they get out of date. And I got to say, money doesn't grow on trees. And as we see a declining fuel tax, I'm curious, how do you, as a commissioner of DMV, ensure that we are charging the right amounts for these things and making sure that we're not using a value that was set 20, 30 years ago, and looking at the inflationary times that we're here right now? Are there mechanisms that you would recommend us to explore to just make sure that we're charging an adequate amount for these fees to keep it in pace with inflation to cover all the expenses related to them?
Well, I think currently your statute, and as I understand it, is the DMV miscellaneous bill, which is where all of the fees are established, or the fee bill in Title 23, give the opportunity to look at those fees every 3 years. And those fees are aligned, and this is previous to me, but what I understand is that when the last fee bill was done, they went through every line item, which is over 200 fees, and applied the CPI, because, and Mike knows more of this than I do, previous to that, they used to pick and choose the fees, or the higher, go ahead.
Right. In previous years, the way the fee bill was done is they picked the high use items, and those were the fees that were raised. And then we would end up in a situation where, and a fee that hadn't been raised for years would then come up, and then the question became from the legislature, why hadn't this been touched in so many years? So when we last did the fee bill, which I think is 6 years ago.
But it was before 2017.
Yes. So we touched everything. We went through and we updated every single one, so they all got reset as of that date. So, but that's just, just a little explanation that they're all reset now. And if another few bills done, then.
So back to,
Yes,
you
Senator
know,
Burke.
I do not have another proposal,
Senator Burke, I'd like to ask a
Senator.
question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just, because Senator Kitchell has brought this up a couple times, that we haven't had a fee bill just for the new guys' benefit. There used to be, it used to be a regular thing, we have a fee bill. But partly it's because of the governor has, the commissioner works for the governor, and the governor has said we don't want to raise fees. And so we haven't done that for, basically since we've had this governor. And Senator Kitchell sent out a report recently that addresses.
Did you notice they didn't total it? But it totals over 20 million.
Yeah, because it's not just the DMV fees.
No,
it's all
no, but
fees.
the majority are related to the DMV.
Right, there's a lot of different fees in there. So there was a thing called a fee bill that we did on a regular basis, prior to my time here too, but there hasn't been one. And you can debate whether needed or not, but that's how that's supposed to be addressed that way. But I had a question on the education unit is when the students trained and it says supported, does that include like all the high schoolers, the 16-year-olds getting their licenses, or is that 3,400 students that are trained by DMV specifically? Do you understand the question?
No, right, it's a combination of,
Those are the ones done through the private track.
But it may have been some of the commercial, the way they
Yes,
did it.
yes.
Yeah, so it is students, and it can be new drivers and commercial vehicle drivers. They're students trained through private approved training schools.
So when you say supported, you're like just supporting by training the trainers. DMV itself doesn't do any, right, have its own students.
Correct. We manage and oversee the private training schools or individual instructors. And they
have their own
Go ahead.
course. They have their own code, whether that be just a driver's license, a CDL, or a motorcycle. But the only exception to that is school bus. Or do you when you use the word administered there, is that the same with school bus driver clinics? Those are also just, you support them. I have a private entity that do that, or is DMV actually training school bus drivers?
Go ahead.
We support the school bus driver training clinics. So it's private individuals that perform the clinics. We provide the documentation, the manuals, and the support needed for them to do that for us.
So DMV doesn't train any driver of any vehicle directly. It's always just through a third party.
Correct. The only training that I would say is the motorcycle safety instructors, because they are doing a training for motorcycle riders. But other than that, no, we do not train. We support and we perform the examinations.
Right, and train the trainer.
And we also do, especially in the school bus, Pat McMenon does hold clinics to ensure that they're all the schools are in line with the expectations and what has to be trained as part of that. And it's an area we spend a lot of time in because school bus drivers are needed and there are very specific requirements with that.
Okay, do we have much more? Because we're running way behind here. How much more do you have?
I will just say to you, the last slide, I don't need to, the next slide is just our facilities and logistics. And we've talked about that before. And then we're in tomorrow.
Okay.
On the budget. And
all right,
so we can end.
Okay, how about Senator Ingalls? One last question.
I just gonna, I have some school bus questions with drivers and stuff like that, but if we can just answer those tomorrow. And
Sure.
I have a driver that sent me some questions, so we'll worry about that tomorrow.
All right, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Have a great
Thank you very
day.
much. Okay, committee, we'll get you a 10, 15-minute break. We'll reconvene at 5 after 11.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.